I watched the man who carried my husband's casket pour a drink for the woman who held my hand at the funeral. They were laughing, sitting on my velvet couch, wearing my husband's clothes, toasting to how easy it was to kill him. They thought I was hours away, crying in bed. They didn't know I was watching them through a camera lens, standing behind the wall, holding the evidence that would bury them both. I never wanted to go back to the Blue Ridge Mountains. For 730 days, I had avoided even looking at a map of North Carolina. The GPS on my dashboard was screaming at me to make a U-turn, but I couldn't. I had to sell the house. My knuckles were actually white. I know people say white-knuckled as a figure of speech, but I looked down at my hands gripping the steering wheel of my 10-year-old Honda Civic, and the skin was stretched so tight over the bone it looked like parchment paper. I was nauseous. A sour, acidic taste sat at the back of my throat, the kind you get when you haven't eaten anything but saltine crackers and anxiety for a week. I took the curve around mile marker 42 a little too fast. The tires screeched against the wet asphalt and my purse slid off the passenger seat, dumping its contents into the footwell. Lipstick, 3 unpaid parking tickets, and the thick manila envelope Cameron had given me yesterday. I reached down to shove the papers back in, my eyes darting between the winding road and the mess. Just seeing the corner of the bank logo on those documents made my stomach cramp. Cameron, my husband's cousin and our supposed financial savior, had sat me down in his glass-walled office just 48 hours ago. He had slid a spreadsheet across his mahogany desk with the grim expression of an undertaker. "It's the audit, Zora," he had said, tapping a figure in red ink that had too many zeros. Landon wasn't just in debt, he was drowning. The IRS is going to seize everything if we don't liquidate the mountain estate immediately. I managed to hold them off for 2 years, but the grace period is over. I had tried to argue. I tried to tell him that Landon was meticulous, that he had life insurance. But Cameron had pulled out a binder, a literal 3-inch binder, full of failed investments and loans I had never seen before. He showed me signatures that looked like Landon's. He showed me notices from the bank dated 3 weeks ago. I felt stupid. I felt like the clueless trophy wife, even though I had worked 2 jobs while Landon built his company. So here I was, driving to sell the only place where I had ever been truly happy, to pay off debts I didn't know existed, based on paperwork I was too grief-stricken to question. The fog was getting thicker as I climbed past 3,000 feet. It wasn't the romantic, wispy mist you see in movies. It was a heavy, gray soup that stuck to the windshield and made the wipers squeak in a rhythm that sounded like a dying bird. Squeak thump, squeak thump. I turned off the radio. I couldn't handle the noise. I needed to focus on not driving off the cliff edge. I kept rehearsing what I would find. Tall weeds, shattered windows, raccoon infestations. Cameron had warned me the place was likely condemned by nature, which is why we had to sell it for cash, quickly, to a developer he knew. "Pennies on the dollar, Zora," he had said, "but it's better than prison for tax evasion." I pulled the car onto the gravel access road. The stones crunched loudly under my tires, a sound that felt like it was breaking the silence of a tomb. I was trembling. I had to physically command my right foot to move from the gas to the brake as the main entrance came into view. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I stopped the car about 50 feet from the main gate. I just sat there, the engine idling, vibrating through the seat into my lower back. I stared. I rubbed my eyes, smudging my mascara, and looked again. The mental image I had built over the last 24 months was a rotting, rusted iron barrier covered in kudzu vines. I expected the wood to be gray and splintered. I expected to have to climb over it because the electric motor would have died 2 winters ago. Instead, the gate looked hydrated. The wood wasn't gray. It was a rich, deep cherry color, glistening with what looked like fresh marine-grade varnish. The iron hinges didn't have a speck of rust. They were painted a matte black that absorbed the gloomy mountain light. The kudzu, which eats everything in the south, had been trimmed back into a neat, respectful line 3 feet away from the posts. "What on earth?" I whispered. My voice sounded raspy in the small car cabin. I put the car in park and stepped out. The air was freezing, at least 15 degrees colder than it had been in the city. I pulled my thin cardigan tighter around my chest, shivering immediately. The silence of the mountain was heavy, broken only by the tick, tick, tick of my car engine cooling down. I walked up to the keypad mounted on the stone pillar. I reached out a shaking finger to touch it. It shouldn't be working. Cameron told me he had cut the utilities a year ago to save money. He showed me the disconnect notice from the power company. But the keypad was glowing. A soft blue LED light hummed behind the buttons. I stood there, frozen, my finger hovering over the number 5. My brain started doing mental gymnastics to make this make sense. Maybe the power company made a mistake. Maybe Cameron paid a gardener out of his own pocket to make it presentable for the sale and didn't want to worry me. Yes, that had to be it. Cameron was always taking care of things, so I wouldn't have to stress. He probably had the gate fixed up so the developer wouldn't lowball us too hard. I tried to remember the code. Landon used to change it every 6 months. The last one I remembered was our anniversary. I pressed the numbers. 1, 0, 1, 4. The keys beeped with a crisp, high-pitched tone. Then a heavy mechanical thunk echoed inside the pillar. The gate began to swing inward, smoothly, silently, not a single squeak. It moved with the heavy, expensive grace of a bank vault door. I watched it open, feeling a cold pit form in my stomach. This wasn't just fixed up. This was maintained. This was daily use. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I got in, but I didn't close the door immediately. I looked back at that perfect, gleaming gate. A rational person would be relieved the property wasn't a ruin, but I wasn't relieved. I was terrified. It felt like walking into a house where the dinner table is set, but no one is home. I drove the car up the winding driveway, the gravel crunching loudly. I parked in the circle drive right in front of the main house. I turned off the engine, and the silence rushed back in, ringing in my ears. I stepped out, slamming the door a little harder than I meant to. I turned to look at the house. It was a sprawling craftsman style with a wraparound porch, built from local stone and timber. It looked majestic. And then I saw the garden. Landon had been obsessed with roses. Not the easy knockout roses you buy at the hardware store, but high-maintenance, finicky hybrid teas that die if you look at them wrong. His pride and joy were the Mr. Lincolns, deep velvet red roses with a smell so strong it could knock you over. When Landon died, I assumed the roses died with him. They needed daily water, specific pH-balanced fertilizer, and constant pruning. I walked over to the main bed, my boots sinking slightly into the mulch. They were magnificent. Dozens of deep crimson blooms stood at attention, their heads heavy and full. The leaves were a glossy dark green, not a single black spot or yellow edge in sight. I reached out and cupped one of the flowers. The petals were soft and cool. I looked down at the soil. It was black, rich, and wet. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the fact that I was ruining my only pair of good jeans. I pressed my palm into the dirt. Water squeezed up between my fingers. "No," I breathed out. "No, no, no." This wasn't rain. It hadn't rained in 3 days. The weather report said so. This was irrigation, or a hose. I scanned the dirt around the base of the bush. And that's when I saw it. A small blue plastic clip. I picked it up. It was a plant tie, used to secure the stem to a support stake. But it wasn't old and brittle from the sun. It was brand new. The plastic was flexible. Someone had been here. Not a month ago, not a week ago. Today, maybe this morning. I stood up fast, spinning around to look at the forest line surrounding the property. I felt exposed. I felt like a deer in the middle of a rifle range. Was the gardener here? Was it a squatter? "Hello," I called out. My voice cracked. "Is anyone here?" A crow cawed from a pine tree, making me jump about a foot in the air. I thought about Cameron again. If he hired a gardener, why lie about the house being a ruin? Why tell me it was a tear down if he was paying someone to clip roses with brand new plastic ties? The math wasn't adding up. The audit said we were broke. The house said we were flush with cash. I walked up the stone steps to the porch. My footsteps sounded too loud on the wood. I reached into my purse for the key ring. I had the original set. Cameron had a copy, of course, as the executor. I slid the key into the deadbolt. It turned with zero resistance. Usually you had to jiggle the handle because the door warped in the humidity. Not today. I pushed the door open and braced myself for the smell. You know the smell of an empty house. Stale air, dust, trapped heat, maybe a dead mouse in the walls. I took a breath. Lavender. It hit me like a physical slap. Fresh, sweet lavender with an undertone of lemon furniture polish. It smelled like a spa. It smelled like home. I stepped across the threshold and closed the door behind me, locking it immediately. The click of the lock echoed in the massive foyer. I looked down at the floor. The hardwood was gleaming. I could see the reflection of the chandelier in the planks. There were no dust bunnies in the corners, no cobwebs on the ceiling fan. To my left was the entryway bench where we used to sit to take off our muddy boots. Sitting right there, perfectly aligned, was a pair of shoes. They weren't my shoes. They weren't Landon's old boots. They were men's loafers, Italian leather. Expensive. I recognized the horse-bit metal clasp across the top, Gucci. I knew exactly how much those cost because Cameron had bought a pair just like them 2 years ago to celebrate a big deal. I stared at the shoes. They looked practically new, but the soles had a tiny bit of dried mud on the heel. Fresh mud. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise them. Someone was living here. I took a step back, my hand reaching for the doorknob. I should leave. I should get in the car, drive down the mountain, and call the police. That was the smart thing to do. But then I saw the mail. On the console table, there was a neat stack of envelopes. I walked over, my legs shaking. I picked up the top one. It was a utility bill, addressed to Cameron Miller. Not estate of Landon Miller, just Cameron. I flipped through the rest, a subscription to a wine magazine, an Amazon package slip, all addressed to Cameron, at my house. The house, he told me, was a rotting money pit that was bankrupting me. I dropped the mail back onto the table. The fear was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp confusion that was rapidly turning into anger. He wasn't just maintaining it, he was using it. I needed to know why, and I needed to know who else was here. The house was silent, but it felt occupied. I took off my own boots, leaving them by the door so I could walk silently in my socks. I crept through the living room. The leather couches were conditioned. The throw pillows were fluffed and karate chopped in the middle, just the way the cleaning lady used to do it. I headed for the stairs. I needed to get to Landon's office on the second floor. Landon was a paranoid man. He worked in cybersecurity, and he had built a panic room of sorts behind the built-in bookshelves in his office. It wasn't really a panic room, more of a server closet where he kept his hard drives and the central hub for the security cameras. He used to joke, "If I ever die mysteriously, check the black box in the wall." I climbed the stairs, stepping on the edges of the treads to avoid squeaks. The house was settling around me, making small groans that made me freeze every 3 steps. The door to the office was closed. I turned the knob slowly, wincing as the mechanism clicked. I pushed it open. The office was immaculate. Landon's mahogany desk was polished to a mirror shine. But something was wrong. His chair, his favorite ergonomic Herman Miller chair, was adjusted to the wrong height. Landon was 6'2". Cameron was 5'9". The chair was lowered. I walked over to the massive bookshelf that covered the entire east wall. It was filled with Landon's technical manuals and old encyclopedias. I knelt down by the bottom shelf, 3rd section from the left. I felt under the wood for the release trigger. It was a tiny metal latch, no bigger than a paperclip. I found it and pressed. Click. Nothing happened. Usually the bookshelf would pop forward an inch on a spring. It didn't move. "Come on," I whispered, pressing harder. It was stuck. Maybe from humidity, maybe from lack of use. I dug my fingers into the small gap between the shelf and the wall molding. I pulled. It felt like trying to move a parked car. I gritted my teeth and planted my feet. I pulled again, putting my entire body weight into the leverage. Snap. A sharp pain shot up my hand. I gasped, dropping my hand to my chest. I had ripped my index fingernail back to the quick. Blood started to well up immediately, dark and fast. "Damn it," I hissed, sticking my finger in my mouth. The metallic taste of copper filled my tongue. I looked at the shelf. It had moved maybe a quarter of an inch. I couldn't give up. I wiped my bleeding finger on my jeans, leaving a dark streak on the denim. I grabbed the shelf again, this time using my forearms to brace against the frame. I didn't pull. I rocked it. Heave. Heave. Crack. The seal broke. The heavy oak unit swung forward on its hidden hinges with a low, grinding rumble that sounded like thunder in the quiet room. I froze, waiting for footsteps, waiting for someone to yell, "Who's there?" Silence. I slipped through the gap into the darkness behind the wall. The air inside the hidden room was stale and warmer than the rest of the house. It smelled of ozone and hot electronics. It was a tiny space, barely 4 feet wide, lined with server racks that hummed with a low-frequency vibration. I pulled the bookshelf closed behind me until it clicked shut. Now I was in total darkness, except for the blinking green lights of the modems. I fumbled for the desk lamp Landon kept in here. I found the switch and clicked it. A dim yellow bulb flickered to life, illuminating the workstation. It was exactly as he had left it. A keyboard, a mouse, and 3 monitors. I sat in the chair. It was dusty. This was the one place the maid hadn't touched. Cameron didn't know about this room. Landon had never told him. Landon didn't trust Cameron. He used to say Cameron had sticky fingers and a loose tongue. I pressed the power button on the main tower. Nothing. My heart stopped. Had he cut the power to this circuit? I pressed it again, holding it down. Whirr, a fan kicked on. It sounded like a jet engine taking off. It was loud, too loud. If anyone was in the house, they would hear this humming through the wall. I bit my lip, watching the screen. A BIOS logo appeared. White text scrolled down the black screen. Checking memory. Okay. Loading operating system. It was agonizingly slow. I stared at the progress bar. 5%, 10%. I looked at my watch. It was 4:15 in the afternoon. The fog outside would be turning to twilight soon. 20%. I started tapping my foot nervously. Tap, tap, tap. I forced myself to stop. The fan whined, changing pitch. It sounded like it was struggling to cool the old processor. "Please," I whispered to the machine. "Please, just work." 50%. I thought about the envelope in the car, the debt, the audit. If Cameron was living here, spending money on Gucci loafers and gardeners, where was that money coming from? If Landon was bankrupt, how was Cameron paying the electric bill? 90%. The screen flickered, went black, and then the blue login screen appeared. User, admin. Password. I stared at the blinking cursor. Password. I tried his birthday. 0812. Incorrect password. I tried our anniversary. 1014. Incorrect password. My hands started to sweat. I wiped them on my thighs. I had one more guess before the system locked me out for an hour. Landon had a rule. 3 strikes and you're out. I closed my eyes. I tried to hear his voice. What mattered to him? What was the one thing he would never forget, but no one else would know? I remembered the day he proposed. It wasn't on a date. It was the day we paid off his student loans. He had cried. He said, "Now I'm free." The date of the final payment. We had framed the check. 0303. I typed it in slowly. 0303. I hit enter. The screen froze for a second. Then the little hourglass icon turned. Welcome, Landon. The dashboard loaded. A grid of 16 camera feeds popped up on the center monitor. My breath caught in my throat. Most of the feeds were black, offline, but 4 of them were live. The living room, the kitchen, the master bedroom, and the front porch. The living room feed showed the empty couch. The kitchen feed showed a sparkling, clean granite island with a bowl of fresh fruit on it. I grabbed the mouse. My hand was shaking so bad the cursor jumped across the screen. I navigated to the Playback tab. I wanted to see who had been watering the roses. I clicked on Previous 24 Hours. I dragged the timeline back to last night. The video buffered for a second, then clarified. The timestamp read, yesterday, 8:42 p.m. The living room lights flicked on. A man walked into the frame. He was holding a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. He was wearing a white linen shirt, unbuttoned at the top. I gasped, covering my mouth with both hands to stifle the noise. It was Cameron. But he wasn't wearing his own clothes. That linen shirt, that was Landon's. I had bought it for him in Cabo. It had a tiny tear on the cuff. I leaned closer to the monitor. There it was, the tear. Cameron was wearing my dead husband's shirt, drinking from my dead husband's crystal, walking around my dead husband's house like he owned the deed. He turned and said something to someone off camera. He was smiling. A nasty, arrogant smile I had never seen on him before. Then a woman walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe. My silk robe. The peach-colored one with the lace trim. She had a towel wrapped around her hair. She walked up to Cameron and took the glass from his hand. She took a sip, then threw her head back and laughed. The towel slipped a little. I saw the face. I stopped breathing. The room spun. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a girlfriend Cameron had picked up. It was Kira, my best friend. The woman who had organized the funeral. The woman who had held my hand while they lowered the casket. The woman who had told me, "You need to sell the house, Zora. It's too much pain to keep it." She was standing in my living room, wearing my robe, kissing my husband's cousin. I reached for the trash can under the desk and dry heaved, my stomach convulsing violently, but I couldn't look away. I forced my eyes to stay open. The screen resolution was 1080p, crisp enough to see the condensation on the glass Cameron was holding. I watched them settle onto the sofa. My sofa, the one we bought at an estate sale in Charleston. Kira tucked her legs under her, the silk of my robe sliding up her thigh. Cameron reached out and rested his hand on her knee. It wasn't a groping, sexual touch. It was worse. It was familiar. It was the kind of touch you give someone when you've been sharing a bed for years. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, right behind my sternum. On the screen, Kira said something, gesturing with a piece of apple she had picked up from the tray. Cameron threw his head back and laughed. It was a full-throated belly laugh. I hadn't seen Cameron laugh like that since he was 12. Around me, he was always the somber, worried accountant, constantly furrowing his brow about market volatility. Here, in the privacy of my dead husband's living room, he looked relaxed. He looked like a king. I moved the mouse, my hand trembling so badly the cursor skittered across the timeline. I needed to hear them. I needed to know what was so funny about widowhood. I clicked the speaker icon on the bottom right of the video player. Static hissed through the headphones sitting on the desk. I grabbed them and pressed the cups over my ears, creating a seal against the humming of the server fans. The audio was tinny, picked up by the microphone in the smart home hub on the mantelpiece, but it was clear. "Idiot left the gate code as the anniversary," Cameron was saying. His voice sounded deeper through the speakers. "I told you we didn't need to change the locks immediately." Kira's voice cut in, smooth and sharp like glass. "I still think it's risky. What if she decides to come up for a nostalgia trip? Zora? Cameron scoffed. He took a sip of his drink. Zora is afraid of her own shadow. She thinks this place is haunted. Plus, after the audit I showed her yesterday, she's probably curled up in a ball in Atlanta, trying to figure out how to sell her jewelry. I squeezed my eyes shut. The shame was hot and prickling on my neck. He was right. That's exactly what I had been doing. I rewound the footage about 2 minutes. I wanted to catch the beginning of the conversation. Kira was walking into the room again. "I poured the rest of that tea down the sink," she said. My eyes snapped open. Tea. Landon drank tea every night. Earl Grey with a splash of milk. It was his ritual. "Good," Cameron replied, not looking up from his phone. "Did you wash the canister?" "Bleached it," Kira said, sitting down. "God, that stuff smelled awful. I don't know how he drank it without gagging." "He drank it because he trusted you, Kira," Cameron said. There was no remorse in his voice, just a matter-of-fact tone, like he was discussing a spreadsheet error. "You told him it was a holistic heart strengthener. Landon would have eaten dirt if you told him it was organic." I stopped breathing. My hand flew to my throat. Kira laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Well, it certainly strengthened his heart. Right into cardiac arrest." "Cleanest heart attack the coroner ever saw," Cameron toasted the air with his glass. "Foxglove concentrate is a beautiful thing when you dose it over 3 months. Looks just like natural failure." I ripped the headphones off my head and threw them onto the desk. The silence in the small room was deafening. Foxglove. I knew what that was. Digitalis. It slows the heart. Kira had brought him special herbal blends from her boutique for months. She said they were for his stress. She brewed them for him when she came over for dinner. I had thanked her. I had literally hugged her and thanked her for taking care of him. A wave of bile rose up my throat, acidic and violent. I spun the chair around and grabbed the small plastic wastebasket under the desk. I retched, my body convulsing, emptying the nothingness in my stomach into the bin. I sat there for a moment, gasping for air, wiping a string of saliva from my lip with the back of my hand. They didn't just kill him. They made me watch him die slowly, telling me he was just tired, while they poisoned him in his own kitchen. I wiped my mouth with the sleeve of my cardigan. I needed to get out. I needed to drive to the police station and drag the sheriff up here by his collar. I turned back to the monitors to shut down the system. I didn't want them to see the login activity. As I reached for the power button, a flash of movement on the bottom left screen caught my eye. The live feed driveway camera. A pair of headlights cut through the fog, blinding the lens for a second. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. A white Range Rover pulled up the gravel drive. I recognized the license plate. K-Style. It was Kira's car. They weren't supposed to be here. Cameron said they were going to a gala in Charlotte tonight. Then the horror hit me. My Honda Civic. It was parked right in the center of the circular driveway, directly in front of the porch steps. There was no way to miss it. It was a beige blemish on their perfect crime scene. I watched on the screen as the Range Rover slammed to a halt inches from my bumper. The doors flew open. Cameron jumped out. He was wearing a suit, but his face was twisted in confusion. He stared at my car. He walked around it, peering into the windows. I saw him spot my purse on the floorboard. He turned to Kira, who was standing by the passenger door, looking pale. He shouted something I couldn't hear because the outdoor mics didn't pick up that far away, but I could read his lips. "She's here." I killed the monitor. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the tiny green LED on the surge protector. I sat frozen in the chair, my hands gripping the armrests so hard the leather creaked. Slam. The front door of the house crashed open downstairs. It vibrated through the floorboards. "Zora!" Cameron's voice roared. It wasn't the smooth corporate voice anymore. It was guttural, animalistic. "Check the kitchen," Kira shrieked. Her voice was higher, laced with panic. "She knows, Cameron. Why is she here? Shut up and find her." I heard heavy footsteps running on the hardwood floor. Stomp, stomp, stomp. They were moving fast. I stood up, my knees shaking so badly they knocked together. I needed a weapon. I felt around the desk in the dark. A stapler, a pen cup, useless. I heard cabinet doors slamming in the kitchen. Bang, bang, bang. "She's not down here," Kira yelled. "Upstairs," Cameron commanded. "She has to be upstairs. The car engine is still warm." My blood ran cold. He had touched the hood of my car. He knew I had arrived minutes ago. I heard them hit the stairs. Their footsteps thundered up the wooden treads. They weren't being careful anymore. They were hunting. I backed up until my spine hit the cold metal of the server rack. I was trapped in a box with one door that was disguised as a bookshelf. The footsteps reached the second-floor landing. They paused. "Guest rooms first," Cameron barked. I heard doors being thrown open down the hall. 1, 2, then silence. I held my breath. I pinched my nose to stop myself from making even the tiniest wheeze. The fan in the server rack whirred behind me, a constant white noise that I prayed covered the sound of my heartbeat. The doorknob to the office turned. Click. The door swung open. "Empty," Kira said, her voice trembling. She sounded like she was right on the other side of the wall, because she was. The bookshelf was only an inch of wood and plaster thick. "Check the balcony," Cameron said. He sounded out of breath. Maybe she jumped. I heard them walk into the room. The floorboards in the office creaked under their weight. Then Kira stopped. "Cameron," she whispered, "look at the chair." I squeezed my eyes shut. The chair. I had sat in it. I hadn't put it back to the lowered height. "What about it?" "It's raised," Kira said. "It's high, Landon's height. You always lower it when you work in here." "So what? Maybe the cleaning lady moved it." "The cleaning lady comes on Tuesdays," Kira snapped. "And look at the dust on the desk. There's a smear. Right there near the keyboard. Someone wiped it." Smart. She was so evil, but she was so smart. "The panic room," Cameron said. His voice dropped an octave. "What panic room?" "Landon had a server closet. He never showed me where it was, but he mentioned it once when he was drunk. He said he kept his brain in the walls." I heard a thud as a fist hit the bookshelf, right in front of my face. "Open it," Cameron growled. "How? I don't see a handle." "Help me pull this shelf down." I heard them grabbing the wood. The entire wall shook. Books tumbled off the shelves on the other side, hitting the floor with heavy thuds. I lunged for the manual deadbolt on the inside of the secret door. It was a simple steel slide bolt. I slammed it home. Clack. "It's locked from the inside," Cameron yelled. "She's in there. Zora, open this damn door." He threw his shoulder against the wood. The bookshelf groaned, but the steel bolt held, for now. "Get the tire iron from the truck," Cameron screamed at Kira. "Go, now!" I heard Kira running out of the room. I had maybe 90 seconds. I grabbed the desk lamp and shone it frantically around the tiny room. There were no windows, no back door, just the server racks and the ceiling. The ceiling. In the corner above the main server tower was a square metal grate. The HVAC return. Landon had installed a dedicated cooling line for the equipment. I scrambled up onto the desk, my boots slipping on the polished wood. I reached up. The grate was screwed in. "No, no, no," I whimpered. I dug into my pocket. My car keys. I pulled out the key ring. I jammed the tip of my house key into the slot of the first screw. It was a Phillips head. The key didn't fit perfectly. I twisted hard. The metal bit into my palm. The screw turned a quarter inch. Bang. Cameron hit the door again on the other side. "I know you can hear me, Zora." "You're making a big mistake." I ignored him. I twisted the key again. The screw fell out, hitting the desk with a ping. 3 more screws. I worked faster, sweat stinging my eyes. The second screw stripped. The metal head was soft. "Come on," I begged. I used the edge of the key to pry the corner of the grate. The metal bent. Downstairs, the front door slammed again. Kira was back. "I got it!" she screamed from the hallway. I hooked my fingers into the mesh of the grate and pulled with everything I had. The 2 remaining screws popped out of the drywall with a crunch of plaster dust. The grate fell, hitting my shoulder. A dark square hole gaped above me. I heard the heavy, metallic clang of a tire iron hitting the wood of the bookshelf. Crack. A splinter of oak flew into the room through a crack in the door. They were breaking through. I jumped, grabbing the edge of the ductwork. The metal was sharp. It sliced into my palms, but I didn't feel it. I pulled myself up, kicking my legs, scrambling for purchase on the server rack. My waist cleared the opening. I wiggled my hips through, dragging my legs up just as the bookshelf split down the middle. "There she is," Cameron roared. I pulled my feet into the darkness of the duct just as the beam of a flashlight cut through the dust below me. The duct was a galvanized steel coffin. It was barely 18 inches wide. I dragged myself forward on my elbows, the sharp metal seams snagging the wool of my cardigan. Dust, thick and gray as lint, coated my tongue. Below me, muffled by the sheet metal, I heard a crash. "Where does this go?" Cameron screamed. His voice sounded tinny, vibrating through the floor of the duct. "The laundry room," Kira yelled back. "Outside! The vent exits over the mudroom." I scrambled faster. My knees banged against the metal with every inch. Thud, thud, thud. I was making too much noise, but stealth was gone. I was a rat in the walls, and the exterminators were sprinting downstairs. I saw a grate of light ahead, the exterior vent. I reached it, my fingers scrabbling against the louvers. It was plastic, brittle from years of UV exposure. I didn't bother trying to unscrew it. I rolled onto my back, pulled my knees to my chest, and kicked. Crack. The plastic shattered. A chunk of it fell away, revealing the gray, foggy twilight. I wiggled my hips through the opening. The drop wasn't huge, maybe 10 feet to the concrete slab of the utility area. But in the dark, with adrenaline shaking my muscles, it looked like a canyon. I shoved myself out. Gravity took over. I hit the concrete hard. My left foot landed on a loose pebble, and my ankle rolled with a sickening pop. Ah! The cry tore out of my throat before I could bite it back. Pain shot up my leg, hot and white. I collapsed onto the wet pavement, gasping. I rolled onto my side, clutching my shin. The rain had started. Freezing, needle-point drizzle that soaked my hair instantly. I heard the back door of the house rattle. They were trying to open the kitchen door. "It's stuck!" Kira shrieked. "The humidity swore it shut." "Kick it!" Cameron roared. I forced myself up. My left leg wouldn't hold weight. I had to hop, using the wall of the house for balance. I couldn't go to the driveway. My car was there, and so was theirs. They would run me down before I made it 10 yards. I looked at the side yard, the rose garden. The Mr. Lincoln rose bushes Landon had loved so much formed a dense, 6-foot-high hedge along the perimeter of the east lawn. Beyond them was the state forest. It was my only cover. I limped toward them, the mud sucking at my boots. "There!" Cameron's voice came from the side of the house. He had given up on the door and run around. I didn't look back. I threw myself into the hedge. It was like jumping into a pit of razor wire. The thorns were an inch long, hard and hooked. They grabbed my cardigan, my jeans, my hair. I thrashed forward. A thorn gouged my cheek, missing my eye by a fraction of an inch. Another hooked into the soft skin of my palm. I yanked my hand away, tearing the skin. "Zora!" Cameron yelled. He was close. I could hear his heavy breathing. "Don't be stupid. It's freezing out here. Come inside." I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. I pushed deeper into the tangle of woody stems. The roses were beautiful and cruel. They held me tight, but they also hid me. The foliage was so thick and lush, thanks to Cameron's meticulous watering, that I was invisible 3 feet in. I crawled on my hands and knees, dragging my bad leg. The mulch scratched my raw palms. I saw the break in the tree line ahead, the forest. I lunged forward, ripping the sleeve of my sweater completely off. I rolled out of the roses and into the pile of damp pine needles at the forest edge. I scrambled behind a massive oak tree and pressed my back against the bark, chest heaving. A beam of light swept over the rose bushes. Cameron's flashlight. "She went into the woods," he spat. The beam cut through the fog, missing my tree by feet. "Leave her," Kira said, her voice shaking. "She has no car, no phone. It's 30 degrees. She'll freeze to death before she reaches the highway." "I want to make sure," Cameron growled. "Cameron, please, I'm cold. Let's go get the guns from the safe and wait inside. If she comes back, we handle it." I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the whimper. Guns. Landon kept a shotgun for bears. I had forgotten about it. I listened as their footsteps crunched back toward the house. I waited 10 minutes. 10 minutes of shivering so violent my teeth clacked together like dice in a cup. My ankle was throbbing with a dull, heavy bass beat. I stood up, leaning heavily on a fallen branch I found in the dark. I used it as a crutch. I moved away from the house, deeper into the woods, heading downslope. I knew the county road looped around the base of the mountain about a mile down. The descent was a nightmare. Wet leaves over slick mud. I fell twice, sliding on my hip, coating my jeans in freezing sludge. Finally, I saw the gray ribbon of asphalt. I slid down the embankment and stumbled onto the shoulder. It was pitch black. No streetlights up here, just the oppressive canopy of pines and the swirling fog. I started walking. Every step on my left foot sent a jolt of nausea through my stomach. Rumble. A sound behind me. Engines. I threw myself into the drainage ditch, splashing into 6 inches of freezing water. I pressed my face into the mud. A truck roared past. It wasn't the Range Rover. It was a logging truck, its trailer empty, bouncing loudly over the potholes. The wake of wind it created chilled me to the bone. I crawled back out. I couldn't hide forever. Hypothermia was a real thing, and I was soaking wet. Headlights appeared in the distance again, smaller this time, yellow, dim halogens, an older car. I took a breath and stepped into the lane, waving my arms. The car slowed. It was a beat-up Ford Taurus with a rusted hood. It rolled to a stop. The window cranked down. An old man with a trucker hat and a face like a dried apple squinted at me. "You look like hell, Missy," he said. His voice was gravel. "Car accident," I lied. My teeth were chattering so hard the words came out chopped. "Ran off the road. Need motel." He looked at my torn clothes, my bleeding cheek. He didn't look like a Samaritan. He looked like a man assessing a risk. "I have cash," I said. $50 for a ride to the highway." His eyes flicked to my chest, then back to my face. "Get in back. Don't bleed on the upholstery." The Starlight Motor Inn was the kind of place where people went to hide or overdose. The neon sign buzzed with an angry electric hum, and the letter L was burnt out. I handed the driver $50, 2 20s, and a 10. I had $300 tucked inside the lining of my bra. It was a habit from my grandmother. "Always keep running money," she used to say. "You never know when a man will lock the door." I paid for a room with cash. The night clerk, a guy with greasy hair and headphones around his neck, didn't even ask for ID. He just slid a key across the counter. Room 112. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and latched the chain. I limped into the bathroom and turned on the fluorescent light. I gasped. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. My face was streaked with mud and dried blood. A long, angry scratch ran from my ear to my chin. My hair was a bird's nest of pine needles and tangles. My left ankle was swollen to the size of a grapefruit, turning a sickly shade of purple. I sat on the closed toilet lid and peeled off my wet socks. Why didn't I call the police? The question hammered in my brain. I looked at the cheap rotary phone on the wall. If I called them now, what would I say? "My cousin and best friend are living in my house, and I think they poisoned my husband 2 years ago." And what proof did I have? The video footage? It was on the server in the hidden room. I hadn't downloaded it. I had run. By now, Cameron had probably smashed that hard drive into dust. The purchase records? I didn't have them. The tea? Poured down the drain. They were wealthy, respected business owners. I was the grieving, unstable widow who had mental health episodes after the funeral. Cameron had the audit papers. He could claim I burned down the house for insurance money. He could claim I was suicidal. If I went to the police without a smoking gun, they would call Cameron to come pick me up. And I would never be seen again. I needed paper. I needed something physical that couldn't be deleted. I washed the blood off my face with the gritty bar of soap. I wrapped my ankle in a wet hand towel. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair facing the door, clutching the broken branch I had carried from the woods. At 9 in the morning, I walked to the thrift store down the street from the motel. The fog had lifted, but the sun felt like a spotlight exposing me. I bought a pair of oversized men's jeans, a gray hoodie, and a baseball cap. I bought a cheap pair of canvas sneakers because my boots were ruined. The total was $18. I went into the changing room and shed Zora the widow. I put on the anonymous gray uniform of the invisible. Next stop, the gas station. I bought a prepaid flip phone and a card with 60 minutes of airtime. I took my old iPhone out of my pocket. It had been dead since yesterday afternoon. Thank God, or they would have tracked me to the woods. I used the SIM card ejector tool I borrowed from the clerk to pop the tray. I took the tiny chip, my digital soul, and dropped it into the murky blue water of the windshield wiper fluid bucket outside. I watched it sink. I smashed the phone itself with a rock behind the dumpster until the screen was powder. Now I was a ghost. I walked 3 miles to a rent-a-wreck lot on the outskirts of town. My ankle screamed with every step, but I swallowed 3 ibuprofen I had bought at the gas station and kept moving. The guy at the rental counter smelled like stale cigarettes. I put $200 on the counter. "I need a car for 2 days," I said. "Cash, no credit check." He looked at the cash. He looked at my limp. "I got a '99 Corolla Outback, AC don't work." "I'll take it." I drove off the lot in a car that smelled like wet dog and rattled when it went over 40 miles per hour. It was perfect. I drove 2 hours to the town where we used to live, where Landon died. I parked across the street from Miller's Apothecary. No relation to us, just a cruel coincidence of naming. It was an old-school pharmacy, the kind with a soda fountain that nobody used anymore. I pulled the baseball cap low over my eyes. I reclined the seat slightly so I wasn't visible above the dashboard. I watched the door. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. Shift change. Mr. Henderson, the head pharmacist, was a stickler for rules. He was also ancient and blind to anything that wasn't a prescription label. If I asked him for records, he'd call the police or Cameron immediately. I needed Ethan. Ethan was the tech. He was 22, owed Landon a favor for writing him a recommendation letter for college, and was generally terrified of confrontation. At 4:45, the bell above the door jingled. Mr. Henderson walked out, locking the front door, flipping the sign to closed. He got into his Buick and drove away. The lights inside stayed on. The cleaning crew, or the late shift inventory. I saw a silhouette moving near the back counter. Tall, skinny, slumped shoulders. Ethan. I got out of the Corolla. I checked the street. Empty. I walked to the side door, the employee entrance. I knocked. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan's face appeared in the small window. He looked confused. He opened the door a crack. "We're closed, ma'am," he said. I looked up, pushing the brim of my cap back. "Hello, Ethan," I said. His eyes went wide. "Mrs. Miller, oh my God, are you okay?" "I need your help, Ethan," I said, wedging my foot in the door, "and I don't have time to ask nicely." Ethan tried to close the door. The steel frame hit the toe of my cheap canvas sneaker, sending a fresh jolt of agony up my ruined ankle. "Please, Mrs. Miller," he stammered, his acne-scarred face flushing pink. "Mr. Henderson will fire me if I let anyone back here. You need a hospital." I didn't move my foot. I leaned my weight against the door, using my shoulder as a battering ram. I was 5'5" and weighed 120 pounds soaking wet, but desperation is heavy. "I don't need a doctor, Ethan," I hissed. "I need you to look at a screen for 5 minutes." "I can't. HIPAA regulations. It's federal law." He was reciting the script, his eyes darting to the security camera above the loading dock. "Landon wrote your college recommendation letter," I said, my voice dropping to a low, hard flatline. "He sat in his office for 3 hours rewriting it because he wanted you to get that scholarship. He believed in you." Ethan flinched, his grip on the door handle loosened. "He was murdered, Ethan." The words hung in the damp alley air, heavy and impossible. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. "He had a heart attack," he whispered. "Let me in." I pushed harder. He stepped back. I stumbled into the fluorescent brightness of the pharmacy back room. The smell hit me instantly. Rubbing alcohol, synthetic cherry syrup, and dust. It smelled like sickness. 2 minutes, Ethan said, checking his watch. "The cleaning crew comes at 5:15. If they see you, I'm calling the cops myself." I limped to the main computer terminal. My wet sneakers squeaked loudly on the linoleum. "Search for Landon Miller," I ordered. "August 2022. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard. He was shaking. Click, clack, click, clack. The screen populated with a list of prescriptions. Atorvastatin, lisinopril, the standard cocktail for a man with high blood pressure. "Scroll down," I said. "Look for the refills." He scrolled. "There." I pointed at the screen, my finger leaving a smudge on the glass. On August 3rd, 2022, 9 days before Landon died, his regular heart medication, the lisinopril, was flagged. Status: canceled by patient. "Who canceled it?" I asked. Ethan clicked the entry. Notes say, "Patient requested switch to holistic alternative. Dr. Aris authorized via phone." "Dr. Aris never authorized anything over the phone," I said. "He was 70 years old and didn't know how to text. Look at the new order. What replaced it?" Ethan highlighted the next line. "Compound, foxglove extract, hawthorn blend, high potency." "Foxglove," Ethan breathed out. "Digitalis. That's old school stuff. Dangerous if the dosage isn't perfect." "Who picked it up?" Ethan clicked the Pickup Signature tab. A digital capture of a signature popped up on the screen. It was my name, Zora Miller. But the handwriting was wrong. The Z was loopy, decorative. My Z is a sharp, jagged lightning bolt. "I didn't sign this," I said. "I was in the hospital with pneumonia that week. Landon was home alone." "The system says ID was verified," Ethan said, defending the machine. "Mrs. Miller, if your ID was used." "Someone stole my identity to buy the poison that killed my husband." I cut him off. "And I need you to prove it wasn't me." "The hard copy," I said. "You guys keep physical slips for controlled compounds, don't you?" Ethan hesitated. "In the basement. The archive boxes. Go." He ran. I stood there, watching the security monitor. A cleaning van pulled into the parking lot. I had maybe 3 minutes. Ethan came sprinting back up the stairs, holding a dusty half-sheet of paper. "Found it," he panted. He slapped it on the counter. It was the pickup receipt. And there, stapled to the back, was a photocopy of an authorization letter. I read it. "To whom it may concern, please allow my wife, Zora Miller, to make medical decisions regarding my treatment." It was signed Landon Miller. It was a good forgery, but the ink pressure was too even. Landon was left-handed. He smeared ink when he wrote. This was clean. "Do you remember who picked this up?" I asked Ethan. "Look at the date, August 3rd. It was raining, a Wednesday." Ethan squinted at the paper, then closed his eyes. "Yeah, I remember, because she was really intense. She made a scene about the wait time." "Describe her." "Tall, dark hair, expensive coat. She smelled like really strong perfume, gardenia." "Kira. Did she wear jewelry? Yeah, Ethan tapped his own wrist. A bracelet, gold. It had these little charms on it. I remember because it kept clinking against the counter glass while she was tapping her nails. One of the charms was a letter, a big cursive K. The air left my lungs. I had given Kira that bracelet for her 30th birthday. Custom made, 18-karat gold. Ethan, I said, my voice trembling, I need this paper. I can't give you the original. He grabbed it back. If the DEA audits us, make a copy, now. The back door rattled. A key turned in the lock. The cleaners. Ethan shoved the paper into the copier. Whir-clack. He thrust the warm copy into my hand. Go. Out the side, please. I folded the paper and shoved it into the pocket of my oversized jeans. I slipped out the side door just as the main entrance opened. I had the gun. Now I just needed to load it. I sat in the rental car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. It was dark now. The streetlights buzzed overhead. I took the burner phone out of the plastic bag. I inserted the battery. It booted up with a cheerful little chime that sounded grotesque given the circumstances. I dialed Kira's number. I knew it by heart. It rang 4 times. Hello? Her voice was tight, suspicious. Kira? I let my voice crack. I forced myself to hyperventilate for a few seconds before speaking, making my breath ragged. Kira, oh my God. Zora? Her tone shifted instantly. Zora, where are you? We've been calling you for 24 hours. Cameron is frantic. I'm in a motel, I sobbed. I don't know which one. I just ran. Ran from what? Why is your car at the estate? I saw him, I whispered. I saw Landon. Silence on the line. What are you talking about, sweetie? The condescension was back. She thought I was having a breakdown. Perfect. At the house, I stammered. I went to the door and... the shadows. They moved. I heard his voice. He was angry, Kira. He was so angry I couldn't go in. I dropped my purse and I just ran into the woods. A trucker picked me up. Oh, Zora, she sighed. It was a sigh of relief. She bought it. She thought I was just the crazy, superstitious widow. You poor thing, you must be in shock. I can't go back there, I cried. I can't get my car, please. Shh, it's okay. Cameron and I will handle it. We'll bring your car down. Just tell us where you are. No, I shrieked. I'm coming home. I'm taking a bus to Atlanta. Just, please bring my car to my house. I just want to be in my own bed. Okay, she soothed. We'll be there in 3 hours. Just rest. I hung up and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I wiped the fake tears from my face. Gotcha, I whispered. I drove the rental car back to Atlanta, pushing the rattling Corolla to 80 miles per hour on the interstate. I parked it 3 blocks away from my house, in a dark spot behind a 24-hour diner. I limped to my house through the backyards, avoiding the streetlights. Inside, my house felt cold. It was the first time I had been back since the audit meeting. I went to the kitchen drawer. I found a brown manila envelope. I took a red Sharpie and wrote on the front, Witness Statement, August 12th. I left the envelope empty. The threat was in the imagination, not the contents. I placed it on the coffee table right in the center, next to a box of tissues. Then I went to the linen closet. I dug out the old baby monitor camera I used to use to watch my elderly cat when I was at work. It was grainy, black and white, but it had audio. I hid it on the top shelf of the bookcase, wedged between 2 hardcovers, pointing directly at the sofa. I synced it to the old iPad I kept in the kitchen. At 10:15, headlights swept across the living room window. My Honda pulled into the driveway, followed by Kira's Range Rover. I sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall. I needed to look broken. The door opened. Zora, Kira called out. They rushed in. Cameron looked exhausted, his suit rumpled. Kira looked perfect, as always, but her eyes were darting around the room. Oh, thank God, Kira said, rushing over to hug me. She smelled of that damn gardenia perfume. It made my stomach turn. "I'm sorry," I whispered, keeping my eyes down. "I'm so sorry I caused trouble." "It's fine," Cameron said, tossing my car keys onto the side table. "We were worried you'd done something stupid." He sat down in the armchair opposite me. Then he saw it. The brown envelope on the coffee table. Witness statement, August 12th. He froze. His hand, halfway to loosening his tie, stopped in midair. "What is this?" he asked. His voice was too casual. I looked up, blinking slowly. Oh, that. It was in the mailbox when I got home. I haven't opened it. I'm too tired to deal with legal stuff. Cameron stared at the envelope. I could see the pulse jumping in his neck. August 12th was the day Landon died. "I can handle it for you," he said, reaching out. "No," I said softly. "My lawyer said I have to open all official correspondence myself from now on because of the audit." He pulled his hand back like the paper was on fire. They stayed for 20 minutes. They drank the tea I made them, chamomile, safe and boring. They watched me with pitying eyes, but every few seconds their gaze flicked back to that brown envelope. "You should sleep," Kira said finally, standing up. "We'll come back tomorrow to check on you." "Thank you," I said. "You're such good friends." As soon as the door closed behind them, I locked the deadbolt. I grabbed the iPad and ran to the kitchen. I watched the feed from the baby monitor, but they were gone. I needed to see them now. I pulled out the burner phone. I typed a text message to Cameron's number. "I saw the receipt, Cameron. Who is the woman with the gold K bracelet?" I hit send. I switched apps on the iPad to the external security cameras I had installed years ago, the ones Cameron thought were disconnected because he stopped paying the cloud subscription. He didn't know I had switched them to local storage on an SD card. I watched the driveway feed. They were sitting in the Range Rover. The engine was running, but they weren't moving. Suddenly, the interior light of the car flashed on. Cameron was holding his phone. He slammed his hands against the steering wheel. I saw his mouth open in a scream, though I couldn't hear it. He shoved the phone into Kira's face. She recoiled. She grabbed the phone, reading the text. I saw her hand fly to her wrist, to the empty space where the gold bracelet used to be. She wasn't wearing it tonight. They started arguing. Wild, frantic gestures. Cameron pointed at the house, then at Kira. She shook her head violently, crying. They were terrified, and terrified people make mistakes. The next morning, Kira showed up at my door at 9 sharp. She brought muffins, blueberry. She hated blueberry, but they were Landon's favorite. It was a calculated prop to play on my grief. I looked like a wreck. I hadn't washed my hair. I wore the same bathrobe I had slept in. "I can't sleep, Kira," I said, staring at the steam rising from my mug. "I keep thinking about the audit, the debts." Kira sat forward, her eyes gleaming with predatory sympathy. "It's awful, Zora, but Cameron is handling it. You just need to sign the sale papers." "I know," I whispered. "But I found something in Landon's old emails." I printed it out. I slid a piece of paper across the granite countertop. It was a forgery I had spent 3 hours perfecting last night, using Photoshop and an inkjet printer I roughed up with sandpaper. It was an email dated 3 years ago. Subject: the safety net. Body: if the market crashes, the bullion is in the wall safe at the cabin, behind the fireplace. Code is the day we met. Do not tell Cameron. Kira read it. I watched her pupils dilate. She licked her lips, a quick unconscious flicker of greed. "Bullion?" she asked, her voice tight. "Gold?" "I think so," I said, rubbing my temples. "I called a locksmith. He's meeting me up there tomorrow morning at 8 to drill it open. If there's gold, I can pay off the IRS without selling the house." "Tomorrow morning?" Kira stood up too fast. Her chair screeched against the floor. That's great news, Zora." "Yeah," I said, yawning. "I'm going to take a nap. I need to be rested for the drive tomorrow." "You do that," she said, already backing toward the door. "Rest up. Don't worry about anything." She practically ran to her car. She was texting before she even unlocked the door. As soon as Kira's Range Rover turned the corner, I was moving. I threw off the robe. Underneath, I was dressed in black cargo pants and a dark turtleneck. I grabbed my bag, flashlight, duct tape, the burner phone, and the iPad. I sprinted out the back door to the alley where I had parked the rattling rental Corolla. I had to beat them. The drive usually took 2 hours. I did it in 1 hour and 45 minutes, driving like a maniac on the back roads. My knuckles were white, but this time it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. I parked the rental car a mile down the mountain, deep in an old logging trail covered with branches. I hiked the rest of the way up through the woods, ignoring the throbbing pain in my wrapped ankle. The estate was silent. The fog had returned, thicker than before. I bypassed the front gate. I went to the side servant's entrance. I keyed in the code. It beeped green. I slipped inside. The house was cold. I went straight to the library. I opened the hidden door. I had left it unlatched from the inside during my escape. I sat in the chair. I booted up the system. I pulled up the smart home control panel. I wrote a script. If motion detected in living room, then trigger sequence A. Sequence A was simple. Cut main lights, lock magnetic shutters, activate audio playlist. I sat back and waited. At 7:15 in the evening, the perimeter sensors tripped. The monitor showed Cameron's truck, not the Range Rover this time, barreling up the driveway. He didn't even park in the circle. He drove right up onto the lawn, crushing the azaleas. They jumped out. Cameron was carrying a sledgehammer. Kira had a flashlight. They didn't bother with the keypad. Cameron smashed the glass of the front door side panel and reached in to unlock it. Crash. Click. They were in. I watched on the monitor as they ran into the living room. "Behind the fireplace!" Kira screamed. "The email said behind the fireplace!" Cameron didn't hesitate. He swung the sledgehammer. Boom! The drywall exploded. Dust billowed out in a white cloud. "Faster!" Kira yelled, coughing. "She'll be here in the morning." Boom! He hit a stud. The house shook. "There's nothing here," Cameron roared after the third swing exposed the insulation. "It's just wood. Keep digging. It has to be deeper." I hovered my mouse over the execute button. "Welcome home," I whispered. Click. The lights died. Instantly. The heavy metal security shutters on the windows slammed down with a synchronized clang, clang, clang that sounded like prison bars closing. "What the hell?" Cameron yelled. "Flashlight! Kira, give me the light!" "I dropped it!" Kira shrieked. "I can't see." Then the music started. It wasn't loud. It was soft. A violin solo. Vivaldi. The piece Landon used to play on Sunday mornings while he read the paper. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, built into the ceiling speakers. "Turn it off," Cameron bellowed. "It's a timer. It's just a timer." Then came the smell. I activated the HVAC scent diffuser Landon had installed. Sandalwood and mint. Kira started hyperventilating. "He's here. Cameron, he's here. I told you we shouldn't have come back." "Shut up." Cameron swung the hammer blindly in the dark. Whack! He hit the coffee table. Glass shattered. I spoke into the microphone on the desk. I had a voice modulator software running, pitching my voice down just slightly. "Thieves," I said. My voice boomed through the living room. Kira screamed, a raw, blood-curdling sound. "Who is that?" Cameron yelled, spinning in circles. "Zora, is that you? I know you're in here." "Zora isn't here," I said into the mic. "Only the truth is here." I turned on a single spotlight, the track light above the mantel. It illuminated the hole they had smashed in the wall, and it illuminated the small wall safe to the right of the fireplace, the one hidden behind the painting they had knocked down in their frenzy. "There," Kira pointed. "The safe! Open it!" Cameron dropped the hammer and scrambled to the safe. It was a digital keypad. "The day we met," Cameron recited the email. "What day did they meet? Kira, think." "I don't know," she sobbed. "Valentine's Day." "Try Valentine's Day." He punched in 0214. Beep, beep. Error. Wrong! Cameron kicked the wall. Try the wedding, Kira begged. Error. You want the gold? I asked through the speakers. Enter the date you killed him. Silence in the room. Cameron stared at the ceiling. You want me to say it? You want a confession, Zora? Is that it? You think a tape recording will stand up in court? Enter the date, I commanded. Cameron laughed. It was a manic, broken sound. Fine. You want the date? It was August 12th, 2022, the day we freed ourselves from your boring, pathetic husband. He punched the numbers. 0812. The safe clicked. The door popped open. Cameron ripped it open, reaching inside with greedy hands. Empty, he whispered. He pulled out the only thing inside, a cheap plastic tablet stand holding an iPad. The screen lit up. It was my face. Live. Hello, Cameron, I said to the camera in the server room. On the screen in the safe, they saw me sitting in the dark, bathed in the blue light of the monitors. Where is it? Cameron screamed at the tablet. Where is the money? There never was any gold, I said calmly. Just like there never was an audit. Just like there never was a heart attack. Cameron grabbed the tablet and smashed it against the brick of the fireplace. The screen shattered, but the audio kept running for a second. You dead bitch, he howled. I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna finish what the poison didn't do. Look up, Cameron. My voice came from the ceiling speakers now. He looked up. In the corner of the ceiling molding, a small red light was blinking. I'm not recording this for court, I said. I'm streaming it. Cameron froze. To who? Kira whispered. Everyone, I said. The link was sent to Landon's entire contact list, his partners, his clients. Your parents, Cameron. Your boutique customers, Kira. 542 people are watching you right now. I checked the viewer count on my monitor. 612. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Murderer. OMG, call the cops. Is this real? No, Cameron breathed. He backed away, his face draining of color. And by the way, I added, I called the sheriff 20 minutes ago. Listen. Through the heavy shutters, the wail of sirens cut through the fog. Cameron looked at the blocked front door. He looked at the stairs. He grabbed the crowbar from the floor. I'm taking you with me, he roared, sprinting toward the hallway. He hit the stairs, taking them two at a time. He knew where the server room was now. I stood up. I didn't run. I pressed the final button on the console. Release magnetic locks. The front door, the back door, and the side door all unlocked with a loud thud. Police! A voice bullhorned from the front yard. Drop the weapon! We are entering! Cameron stopped on the landing. He looked at the server room door. He looked at the front door where a SWAT team was pouring in, rifles raised. He dropped the crowbar. It clattered down the wooden steps, ringing like a bell. I walked out of the office. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at him. He looked up at me. He looked small. It wasn't foxglove, he whispered, trying one last lie. It was just tea. Tell it to the jury, I said. An officer tackled him, slamming his face into the hardwood floor. Update, 3 months later. The trial hasn't started yet, but the plea deals are already flying. Cameron is trying to pin it on Kira, claiming she drugged him too. Kira is singing like a canary, giving the DA every fraudulent bank transfer Cameron ever made. They are destroying each other, and I don't have to lift a finger. The video of the confession has 3 million views. The gold digger killers, the internet calls them. Kira's boutique is boarded up. Someone spray-painted poison on the glass. Cameron's firm dissolved overnight. I didn't sell the house. I used the life insurance money, which the insurance company paid out immediately once the homicide was confirmed, to fix the hole in the living room wall. I'm sitting on the porch right now. The fog is lifting. The Mr. Lincoln roses are blooming brighter than ever. I hired a real gardener this time. His name is Ethan. He needed a job after he quit the pharmacy, and he's really good with plants. I poured a cup of tea, Earl Grey. I drank it, and for the first time in 2 years, it didn't taste like ash. It tasted like justice. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here,